For the ones who work hard to ensure their crew can always go the extra mile, and the ones who get in early so everyone can go home on time, there's Grainger, offering professional-grade supplies backed by product experts so you can quickly and easily find what you need. Plus, you can count on access to a committed team ready to go the extra mile for you. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Seven things you don't really need to know, but probably should. I'm Ciara Revin, and this is the Sunday 7.
On today's episode of the award-winning Sunday 7, we catch up on the new space race, find out why Meta went dark this week, find out how to get your kids into science, and hear about the man who got himself vaccinated against COVID 217 times. But first, on this day in 1975, the first home video cassettes went on sale. They were made by Sony, with the first tapes allowing 1 hour of video content. Rival JFC launched the VHS format a year later, and it went on to dominate the market, with Betamax falling out of favour. Of course, nowadays, we just stream everything. Things mightn't have been great between America and Russia on planet Earth, but at least in space, the two nations seem to get along. A new 4-person crew with 3 Americans and 1 Russian astronaut arrived on the International Space Station on Tuesday, delivered there by SpaceX in a Dragon spacecraft.
We're so excited to be here. A big thank you to everyone who helped put this together, such a giant team around the world. And we're excited to be on board and ready to take over the watch. Over to you, Mike.
Well, first thing is just great to be back. There's such a sense of familiarity and homeness to the station. And can't wait to get back to work, but just a big shout out to all the folks who got us up here to NASA, our friends at SpaceX for building a great little spaceship and a little taste of the flexibility this morning that we'll be expecting over the next 6 months. I know that our flight's going to go by in a blink of an eye, and really anxious to start.
Space is a hot topic right now, with a moon race back on after almost 5 decades gap between moon landings. The recent landing of a probe on the south pole of the moon didn't seem to go flawlessly, as Texas company Intuitive Machines suffered a number of technical issues with their Odysseus probe, including a snap leg that left it face down in the moon dust. Undeterred, however, both Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin and SpaceX are now firmly in a race to land humans on the moon, along with the Chinese, who aim to have touchdown on the lunar surface by the end of this decade. John Couluris has the amazing job title of Senior Vice President of Lunar Permanence at the Blue Origin, and he says they're all in on catching SpaceX.
We're expecting to land on the moon between 12 and 16 months from today. And I understand I'm saying that publicly, but that's what our team is aiming towards. For humans, we're working with NASA on the Artemis 5 mission. That's planned for 2029.
NASA are depending on SpaceX to deliver astronauts to the moon for the Artemis project, and that involves using Elon's Super Heavy booster rocket. The issue is that both times it's been test-fired so far, it experienced rapid unscheduled disassembly, or as we used to say, it blew up. So how confident is NASA that the SpaceX plan will work?
If it's never been done before, chances are it's going to take longer than you think to do it, and to do it successfully and prove that technology before we trust putting humans on it. There's a long way to go.
And once the moon plan has been completed, where is humanity penciling in for its next trip? Well, NASA Associate Administrator James Free says it has to be the Red Planet.
I see us landing on Mars. Absolutely see us landing on Mars. But we have to work through the moon to get to Mars.
Tuesday of this week saw a dramatic spike in productivity across the world as Meta's various services suffered a dramatic outage. There was plenty of conspiracy theories immediately flooding the internet, but when it comes to these kind of things, there's only one man we can turn to. It's the Smart 7's tech guru, Will Guyatt. So, Will, was it some grand cyber attack scheme that saw Meta go dark?
No, but that doesn't stop people speculating every time one of our major services has an outage, because in 2024, if it isn't there 100% of the time, it can't possibly be that Troy in Arizona has unplugged a server, or that a sleepy engineer in California has accidentally uploaded a wonky line of code that's broken everything. Not every issue in tech is a nefarious cyber attack. The inevitability is that sometimes things go wonky. Whatever happened over there at Meta, it took out Facebook, Instagram, and even the Quest virtual reality platform for several hours and logged millions of people out of their accounts. Now, frustratingly, tech companies are usually really woolly when it comes to explaining outages, and it was no surprise to see Meta blaming an unspecified technical issue for these problems, a bit like a poorly person pointing at their entire body and saying it aches.
It's been a big week for Bitcoin, hasn't it? The daddy of crypto seems to be on an incredible run. What's driving it?
If you're one of those with nerves of steel, it's been a good week for those with crypto investments. It's actually been the best week ever for Bitcoin, and while we're now a little bit slightly off that record high of £53,850 per Bitcoin, investors will still have seen the value of each Bitcoin they own increase close to $3,000 in the last 5 days, which is a huge old bump. Now, there's two reasons for these big increases, and one of them sounds like the plotline of that movie series, The Verge. We're expecting what's known as a Bitcoin halving event next month, and this is when the reward for mining Bitcoins gets slashed by 50%. All Bitcoins, of course, are made through mathematical formulas on computers. You generate them yourself. Now, these halving events have been happening around every 4 years, and the last 3 of them have coincided with previous peaks in value. Now, alongside this thing called halving, you've now got all the fact that all average investors like my dad can now invest in the world of crypto, thanks to a change of rules in the US, which means they're now part of what's called exchange-traded funds. And that essentially means that they can be treated like traditional stocks and shares investments, which means more people have got involved in the risk and reward nature of cryptocurrency.
Is it just Bitcoin, or are we in some new age of crypto?
Well, it's not just Bitcoin that's doing well. There's literally thousands of different cryptocurrencies now in 2024, and most of them appear to be enjoying a little bit of the warm glow in interest from Bitcoin. I still won't be betting my house, though, on continued growth.
We saw the BBC launch a new verified scheme this week which aims to offer content credentials. What are they and how do they work?
We're all now used to verified social media accounts so we can be sure that they're the real deal, but with the rise of deepfakes and other AI-generated content that could be used to create false news stories, this is the BBC essentially now making it possible for readers of their website to find out more about the fact-checking process they've used to check how all the news sources behind a big story stack up. Now, they'll all be adjudicated using a set of standards drawn up by organisations including the BBC, Adobe and Microsoft, who seemingly predicted the rise of generative AI tools back in 2019, a donkey's age ago in tech.
Is this something we can expect to see more organisations adopt?
Well, all decent journalists and reporters should already be adopting this kind of behaviour behind the scenes. But when it comes to spelling out what's going on, it's probably time to start showing what's in the sausage so people can regain trust in news organisations and their verification of fact.
Still to come on the Sunday 7, the Northern Lights over Britain and how to get your kids into science. Traditionally, you'd expect to see the Northern Lights, or more properly, the Aurora Borealis, well, in the north, like a long way north, usually in the neighbourhood of the North Pole. But this week, the Northern Lights have been spotted in the skies above the UK, and one of those wrapped up warmly in search of the cosmic light show was Mark Griffiths from the Cheshire Northern Lights Hunters Group.
So the maximum time, it's very tricky to predict. So you can't predict it during the daytime. It depends what comes in from the sun, really, because you've got filaments and everything hitting, you see. So I knew deep down about 2 o'clock in the afternoon that it was going to start hitting the UK. I don't know why, but I was driving there and I just knew something special was going to happen. I don't know why, I just had that feeling. It was the best night for a long time.
Professor of Space Physics at Lancashire University, Jim Wild, explains what causes the dramatic space light show and why they've shifted.
So the Northern Lights are emissions of light in the night sky, and they're caused by particles from space raining down the Earth's magnetic field and hitting the top of the Earth's atmosphere, and it causes the atmosphere to glow. Well, they normally occur around the edge of the Arctic Circle, but the Earth was actually enveloped in a cloud of material that had been emitted by the sun, and after travelling through space, this material arrived at Earth, and this triggered the Northern Lights to become more active, more energetic, and that pushed the Northern Lights further south than you'd normally find them. And so throughout the British Isles, people could look north and see these lights in the sky.
Emily Calandrelli is known as the SpaceGal. She's an American engineer and science communicator with over 500,000 followers on Instagram and 1 million on TikTok. And she's made it her mission to introduce kids to science. She's just published her second book, Stay Curious and Keep Exploring, which lists 50 experiments that kids can try at home. She says it's important for girls in particular to see people like her in science and that parents also need to get involved.
I didn't know any scientists or engineers growing up. I'm the first person in my family to pursue something like this. But along the way, I learned that you can make yourself one of the smart kids and that no single test defines you. I am trying to make sure that girls like me can see themselves in science and know that they are welcome here too. I see myself as like your friendly best friend scientist who can help the parents kickstart a scientific reaction.
Look at this,
for their
getting
kids.
fun.
This is like the fun element of bonding with your child over science. Because I have 2 kids myself. I know what it's like for a kid to walk into the room and be like, Mom, can we do a science experiment? Can we do a science test?
Yes.
That's what my daughter says. Yeah, but I know that feeling of like, gosh, what are we going to do now?
Still to come at the Sunday 7, are celebrities causing over-medication of menopause and the man who got 217 COVID jabs.
Right after this.
How many of your employees are trying to balance paying bills and saving for retirement? Support your participants today and tomorrow with Vanguard well on your way at institutional.vanguard.com. All investing is subject to risk. Advice provided by Vanguard Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor.
Welcome back.
The menopause has been having a bit of a moment. It was particularly taboo to speak about menopause, which is a natural part of healthy ageing. But recent campaigns with high-profile advocates, including Davina McCall, have pushed the subject into the mainstream. And with prescriptions for hormone replacement therapy or HRT rising by 60% between 2020 and 2022, there's some concern that now the condition is being over-medicated. A new paper published this week in The Lancet suggests that some of the high-profile campaigning has led to a widely held view that menopause increases the risk of mental health conditions or misattributing depression to menopause when in fact women's lives can often simply be stressful. Professor Martha Hickey of the Royal Women's Hospital in Melbourne says it's not something that automatically needs medication.
Our view in this paper is standing back from the individual woman saying you have to go and sort yourself out to being more appreciative of what leads to an increase in symptoms. So, for example, stress at work.
But Carolyn, Harries MP, who is co-chair of the government's Taskforce on Menopause, says that the celebrity campaigners are setting out with good intentions.
I'm just shocked that anyone thinks that celebrities are trying to sensationalise something. All they're trying to do is to give women a voice. Maybe that infuriates some people, but I'm all for women having a voice and having a choice.
The European Union has quietly been working to rein in big tech, with Meta landed with billion-dollar fines for data and privacy breaches and new legislation intended to force big tech to take more responsibility for what is published on their platforms. But it's not just social networks that the regulators have their eyes on. This week saw a €1.8 billion fine for Apple Music after it was found to have limited competition from streaming services such as Spotify. Jess Weatherbed is a news writer at The Verge, and she broke down the thinking behind the massive fine that will happen if Apple appeal.
The reasoning that they gave is that they basically didn't want this to come across as a bit like a parking fine by the level of revenue that Apple brings in. They said that they wanted to use it as an example to prevent them from making similar actions in the future. So they definitely want to send a message by quadrupling the expectation that fine was going to be about €500 million, I believe, was the anticipation that this was going to be. It's likely to take several years. Apple will have to pay the fine regardless, and they'll have to comply with the EU's order, which is basically to stop the actions that they're being fined for the time being, which also plays into the Digital Markets Act that's being raised in the next few days anyway, but they do have room to contest this decision.
The internet is an odd place at the best of times, but one of the oddest strands on the internet has to be the vaccine skeptics. From half-baked conspiracy theories to some truly unbelievable vaccine injury videos, it's been one of the lingering after effects of the pandemic. The anti-vax crew wouldn't have been thrilled then to hear about the 62-year-old man in Germany who has been vaccinated against COVID 217 times over 29 months. Yep. and is perfectly healthy, although no one is recommending you get vaccinated 217 times. CNN's medical correspondent Meg Tirrell explains what exactly went on with the mystery man.
Absolutely nobody should do this. This was, of course, not with any medical guidance that he was doing this. He was actually being investigated by the authorities in Germany, where he was when he got these 217 shots. That's how medical researchers found out about him, and they started to study him. And what they found is that he did have more immune cells in terms of antibodies and T cells than a comparator group who just got 3 vaccine doses, but his immune response wasn't any better or worse necessarily than that control group. Importantly, also, he didn't report any vaccine-related side effects, which is kind of hard to believe, but that is what they say in this paper. And he never got COVID, although they say they don't know if that's because of all these vaccinations or because of his behavior or something else.
This has been the Sunday 7. Wherever you're listening, do us a favour and hit the follow button. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. with the regular Smart 7. Have a great rest of your weekend. Written, produced and published by Daft Doris.
How many of your employees are trying to balance paying bills and saving for retirement? Support your participants today and tomorrow with Vanguard well on your way at institutional.vanguard.com. All investing is subject to risk. Advice provided by Vanguard Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor.